Try to remember your first birthday. Go on. Picture the cake, the candles, the room. You can't actually see any of it, can you? Maybe you remember a photograph instead, and your brain quietly swapped the photo for a memory. This happens to almost everyone on Earth. By the time most people search their earliest years, the trail goes cold somewhere around age 3 or 4. For a long time, scientists assumed something simple. Babies just don't form memories yet. But the real answer is far stranger than that. Your brain wasn't empty back then. It was working overtime. In the early 1900s, Sigmund Freud noticed this universal gap and gave it a name: infantile amnesia. He believed children buried their earliest memories on purpose, pushing down feelings too uncomfortable to keep. For decades, his theory shaped how doctors and parents understood early childhood. But Freud never actually tested infants. He was guessing from the therapy couch, not the crib. What if the real explanation had nothing to do with repression at all? In the 1980s, a psychologist named Carolyn Rovey Collier decided to ask babies themselves. She attached a ribbon from an infant's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. Kick your leg, and the mobile spins. Babies as young as 2 or 3 months old figured this out almost immediately, kicking faster and faster once they realized they were in control. Weeks later, she brought the same babies back into the lab. The moment she hung the mobile again, their legs started kicking before she even touched the ribbon. They remembered. This was a quiet bombshell in developmental psychology, one that overturned decades of assumptions almost overnight. Babies were not blank slates waiting for memory to switch on someday. Their brains were already encoding, storing, and retrieving information, just like yours does right now, reading this sentence. So if babies can remember, why can't you remember being one? A developmental psychologist named Patricia Bauer found part of the answer. She showed that forming a memory is only half the job. Holding onto it as a story you can later tell yourself is something else entirely. Autobiographical memory needs language to give experience a shape worth keeping. It needs a sense of me existing across time, a narrative thread connecting yesterday's self to today's. Toddlers are still weaving that thread one piece at a time, slowly, unevenly, year by year. Without it, early experiences get recorded, but never get filed under a story labeled, "This happened to me." A psychologist named Chi Wang later discovered something just as revealing. The age where this memory gap ends actually shifts depending on culture. Children raised in cultures that emphasize personal storytelling tend to recall earlier memories than children raised in cultures that emphasize family or group experience. The blank years aren't fixed by biology alone. They are shaped by the stories adults teach children to tell about themselves, starting from the very first conversations about "remember when." Here is where the twist gets genuinely strange. In 2014, a neuroscientist named Paul Franklin ran an experiment at the University of Toronto that flipped the entire question around. His team studied the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for stitching memories together. In early childhood, this region is under intense construction, generating brand new neurons at a blistering rate. Franklin's team found that this flood of new neurons doesn't just add memory capacity. It actively rewires the very circuits holding older memories, scrambling and overwriting them in the process. When his team slowed down neuron production in young mice, the mice kept memories they normally would have lost within days. When his team sped up neuron production in adult mice, the opposite happened, and older memories disappeared far faster than usual. Your earliest years weren't a memory failure. They were a memory construction site, and the scaffolding was being rebuilt faster than anything could be filed away for safekeeping. Isn't it strange that the very thing making your brain so flexible in infancy is the same thing erasing the evidence? Think about what that actually means. The faster your brain grew, the faster it forgot, and the two were never separate processes at all. One was simply the cost of the other. So why does any of this matter to you today? Because that same hippocampus is still inside your skull right now, still generating new neurons, just at a much slower pace than it did when you were small. Every time you learn something new, your brain quietly nudges older information aside to make room for it. This is not a flaw in the design. It is the price of owning a system built to keep updating itself instead of freezing in place like a photograph. Forgetting, it turns out, isn't the opposite of memory. It's part of how memory works at all, every single day, whether you notice it or not. The next time you scroll past an old photo and feel nothing, or struggle to recall last week in detail, remember, this isn't decline. It's the same elegant, ruthless process that once rebuilt your entire mind from scratch before you could even speak. You are, quite literally, made out of forgetting as much as you are made out of memory. Every version of you that ever existed had to be partly erased to make room for the next one. Maybe that's not a loss at all. Maybe that's simply what growth has always required, long before anyone had a word for it. Try to remember your first birthday again. You still can't, and now you finally know exactly why. Not because nothing happened in that room with the cake and the candles, but because your brain was too busy becoming the mind you're using right now to bother keeping score.